So what is our baseline frequency, and how can we differentiate between this baseline frequency, this operating frequency, and the vibrational flux that occurs in everyday life? Now, the spiritual path is a journey that takes place on a vibrational scale. And this scale, ranging from density to absolute refinement, is an important part of the puzzle, and the interplay between density and refinement also is an important part of the puzzle. We do not want to reject any aspects of the vibrational scale. It is through working on this vibrational scale that we begin to develop a barometer for where we are in our path, on our path and in our practice. Now, our baseline operating frequency is how we can assess this progress. And the goal of any training is to help us to raise this baseline frequency, this baseline resonating refinement, to higher and higher stages, to more and more refined stages. And this can be represented, this baseline frequency can be represented through the development of our view training. And we can look at the view training as what I call identity fractals, right? What expanse of infinity are you capable of recognizing yourself to be one with and a part of simultaneously? And this is a deep, deep part of the path. Just like the finger is a finger, and it's also a part of the hand. It is at one with the hand, it is of the hand, and it is the hand as well. So a part of and unified with, and that's a paradox that is the same as a drop of water is part of the ocean, and it is the water that is the ocean. It is the droplet and the ocean simultaneously. What is the expanse of that ocean that you are able to perceive yourself to be of, unified with, of, and a part of simultaneously? This view stage, this baseline operating frequency that we're in resonance with, this is the place from which we engage all the momentary response and perturbations of reality. It's from this highest point, or this baseline frequency, that we engage. Now, you can look at these perturbations off the baseline frequency, this being the baseline frequency, as the yin and yang, the positive and negative, the becoming and unbecoming phases of interplay and response in our day-to-day lives. So on our baseline frequency, we have the becoming, right, and the unbecoming, and the becoming and the unbecoming, back to baseline frequency. These can be the becomings of higher refinement, as well as the unbecomings back to baseline, and the becomings of lower, the opposite of refinement, right, and then back to baseline operating frequency. It's not about not having this wave and these perturbations. It's how quickly can you recover your baseline operating frequency, your current highest view that you're capable of holding or existing as in this current stage of your development. So the yin and yang understanding is very, very important. You might have these big dips. Now, do these dips become a new baseline, or do you return quickly? Are you able to recover quickly? And the height to which you recover might exceed that baseline frequency, and then, you'll find where you tend to oscillate in and around. It's very important that we remember that baseline frequency, any movement away from it does not negate that attainment that we've achieved. That's why the recovery is so important. How easily are we able to return? Okay, so whatever depths you're in, that's not a reason to ignore the path and stop engaging. It is simply part of the experience right now. So we can't deny the density of those emotions, whatever that environmental interplay is inducing. It is simply pointing a finger at aspects of ourselves that we're still very much identified with in that lower fractal of identity, right? Aspects of ourselves that we've not recognized to be of, unified with, and of a greater expanse, a greater fractal of identity. When it comes to this, this operating frequency and the difference between these fluctuations and that baseline is a funny thing about outward presentation, right? This can be very misleading. So you can have a facade of high frequency, and that would be taking the high end of some of those momentary fluxes, like incredible excitement and exhilaration all the time, that put on childlike wonderment. These false interpretations of what it means to be a high vibe, in high vibrational responsiveness to the environment. So this facade is really important because these are all drenched in, saturated in, germinated in pride, because we are connecting to the idea of what it might mean to be oscillating at a higher vibration or have a higher baseline frequency, but we're simply looking at the very, very micro aspect of this and not at the full thing. So facades of high frequency often look like what we think high frequency is. And also, you have the facade of lower frequency, which would be, the facade of lower frequency is that you're actually free from density, so you can play with it. You're not excluding it from your reality, which means it can be a part of how you experience the world and how you express and connect with the world. You just simply aren't locked in a tiny identity fractal that is trapped in the bubble of that expression. That is because you are free from the density of that particular vibration. This does not mean that you are detached. This is very, very important. This is not detachment, right? You can be in resonant play with the entirety of the vibrational scale, including the density, without detaching yourself from the density or detaching yourself from the higher refinement. If we do not reconcile this, then we will put on pedestals our own illusions of what it means to be these things, to be high vibration or high frequency. The means with which we interplay through that responsive connection to the environment, that is of this moment. And we can, again, you can look at that scale, those highs and lows, and that place in the middle as a pretty good indicator of roughly where you're at. If we fake it, if we try to pretend to be oscillating at a higher frequency from the standpoint of your baseline operating frequency, this is only going to screw us up. It'll hold us back. So we want to be very sincere with ourselves, very honest with ourselves. We want to be very, very soft in not trying to pinpoint exactly where you are. You want to have an open mind. This is a rough reference point, and it can help us in determining good ways to proceed with our practice. But it's by no means putting ourselves in a box. It's important that we acknowledge that rapid evolution of this baseline operating frequency can illuminate a very, very painful contrast in the aspirant on the path. It can really hurt. So through transmission, the light of the spirit is being magnetized and tuned to a higher vibration, a more refined vibration, more refined frequency. And this refinement is in incredible contrast to our current identity fractal that we experience the world from. So we are perceiving through all of the old response habits, all of the unresolved soul mirror work, all of this stuff. We're perceiving through this density. And that contrast between a greater identity fractal of expanse and that lower one, where we're stuck in that little encapsulated identity, creates an incredible amount of polarity, which requires a lot of chaos to resolve itself into that higher resting frequency that the spirit has been tuned to. Now, over time, the responsiveness of our operating habits, our old habits, this responsiveness starts to rise, to come into resonance with this higher refinement that the spirit has been tuned to. And that process of change creates a lot of pain. It is change, the willingness to change, that often holds us back on the path. We want to excel and evolve on the path, but we don't want to give up who and what we were. We don't want to give up the little tiny identity fractal that we used to think of as the world and unify with a grander identity fractal. This is going to hold us back. We have to be willing to grow, willing to change, willing to be a different person. And that's quite scary, because you sit down, you practice, and you never know who you're going to be when you stand up. You have no way of knowing. You finish your practice, you close off, and you're a different person. You just don't know how yet. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. These parts of our identity that we've held with such pride for, our entire lives can disappear literally in one session. And then you have to be okay with being a different thing. Now, as we said, it is more effective to train with a teacher, get transmission. It's just more painful because there's more chaos, but it is faster. Now, there is a slower way of going through this, and that takes more time. And this slower way is through changing the habits, changing the lower identity, so that it takes on the habits of a more refined spiritual frequency. And then you hope that through the change in the habits and the change in emotion, the change in responsiveness, the change in view, that you start to align the lower body to that higher frequency. And then once you have that higher frequency within, you're able to release those shackles and move up to the next layer. This would be things like reading your sutras. If you're doing deity yogas, they all have different sutras. And what's very fascinating is if you've worked through the frequency of that deity first for however much time that might be, maybe it's a year or two, you might find that if you go back, if you do it backwards and you read the sutras later, you've actually come to all the same realizations and all the same changes in responsive acting with the world that the sutras of that deity dictate. You've simply done it through a more direct means. The one thing we need to be aware with this method is the trap of posing with excitability and unassailable happiness, and posing with compassion, all these fake expressions when we read them, right? So we read something, then we fake what we think at our current layer of development, at our current identity fractal. We read, act in this way, and we think it means a certain thing. So we need to engage with any texts that we're exploring with a very open-minded and open-hearted perspective so that we can actually go through the changes and not hold on to all these old habits and patterns of meaning when it comes to these words. Very, very, very important. So we have these two ways of going about it. One is through transmission in a teacher, very fast, but more chaos, lots of pain. The other is through changing all of the habits, and over time, you come into resonance with that higher vibration, and then, boom, you can sort of float up to the next layer. Okay? Less painful, just takes longer. How does detachment come into this? How does it play a role? Detachment and unresponsiveness are not expressions of evolution on the path. They are expressions of disassociation. They are symptoms of a lack of freedom, and because of the lack of freedom from those particular layers of the vibrational scale, we do our best, we attempt to control them, to control those lower layers, those more dense layers, instead of being free from them. Anything you are free from, you do not need to control. Freedom to engage fully with the moment has absolutely nothing to do with expectations of what, proper conduct might be or proper responsiveness. All of these conduct training and learning, how to act, how to think, the beginnings of most systems, these are scaffolding and nothing more. Scaffolding to help you start to come into resonance with some more refined frequencies. But the scaffolding needs to be let go of, because if you hold on to the scaffolding, you are trying to control. And this will always pose an issue at some point during our training. The larger and more comprehensive and evolved the view, the baseline operating frequency, the identity fractal that we've come into unity with, the more octaves of the vibrational scale we are free to dance with. And this, I cannot state how important this realization is to at least come back to contemplate as you progress along the path. Thank you for watching. If you feel inspired to take the next step on your spiritual path, I'd love to see you at a workshop or a retreat. They're pretty potent, transformative events, steeped pretty strong in a lot of energy, nature, and connection. You can also become a member on the website if you'd like to begin training right away. On the website, you get exclusive access to the available courses there. Right now, these are in Hermetic, Alchemy, Qigong, and Meditation. There's the Tai Chi program as well there. So we can get rolling on those fronts. And of course, you can receive ongoing support with access to the Zen Den, which is a Q&A video reference library. This is there to aid in your understanding, clarity, and confidence when it comes to the training that you're moving through and your path in general. All right, hope you enjoyed this. Please share, subscribe, and of course, always have fun. Practice. Bye.